got the audacity to say, if you gonna be holy, you got to stay single and you can't eat no meat. We're gonna see if we can identify, because they go way back. And when you figure this out, then you getting on board to knowing that other church who came on the scene besides God's church. Just simple as that. Last 2 million years, page 217. And we read the growth of the monasteries. Last 2 million years, page 217, growth of the monasteries. Go ahead.
In every country, the popes had another powerful and dedicated instrument, the monasteries.
Okay, now, it said in every country, the popes had another powerful and dedicated instrument, the monasteries. Go ahead.
The notion of withdrawal from the world to escape from its vices and seek salvation through self-denial and even physical agony was very old.
See, in other words, they've been doing this, withdrawing from the world. And people been doing it, and he named some instances, which we're not going to read that. We just wanted to read. It's talking about the monasteries, and we heard it because we heard of people called monks, right? Well, obviously they had somewhere to live, and they lived off from everybody else. They really kind of took this, except they, like everything else, they done it their own way, but they kind of took this from what God had called in the Bible. He had Nazarites. They were special people, strictly dedicated to God. And they didn't get involved in what everybody else got involved in. But the only problem is they making up their own doctrine. Let's see what some of the doctrine is. Skip down to the next paragraph, because it's going to mention one great monk who was putting the monasteries on the map, putting them in order in the West. Anyway, go ahead.
Monasticism in the West owed its shape largely to one man of vigor and command. Benedict 480 to 543 of Nursia, the modern Norcia in Umbria, northeast of Rome.
Okay, so it said monasticism in the West, it owed its shape to a man of vigor named Benedict. Actually, this pope that we got now, Pope Benedict, he's the 16th Benedict. But this name comes from this guy. He was one of the Benedict. I don't know which one this one was, whether he was the first one or what, but this pope took the same name. So this Benedict, he was serious about what they was doing. Read a little further.
He had been so outraged by what he saw as the vice and corruption of Rome that he spent 3 years as a hermit in a cave at Subiaco in the wild hill country of Latium, to the east of Rome.
Okay, now see, he saw how corrupt Rome was, the religion, the headquarters of the religion he was a part of, so he just withdrew himself and went to a cave somewhere and stayed there 3 years. But he got a lot of attention for doing that, and he ended up running this part of the organization. Skip down to the next paragraph and read that. Go ahead.
In 529, Benedict drew up his rule or regula, which was gradually adopted by most monasteries in the West.
See, if you want to get to the bottom of something, you got to go back to when it, basically to the beginning. That's how you can get to the root. That's how we understand, even though right now we got countless amounts of denominations and churches all over the world. So like I said, people say all the time, I don't know what church, I don't know what to believe. It's so many churches, I don't know where to go. Look, you can break it down to the truth and a lie. That's what you can do. And obviously all these churches that we call churches now haven't been around forever. They had to come from somewhere, right? Because the Bible only speaks about one church. So they had to come from somewhere. So we just going back to its origin. So that's why it went so far back that when this Benedict was on the scene, it said, which obviously we talking about Catholicism, it said 529 Benedict. So we going back to what we know as the 6th century. 5:29, it said he drew up his rule, in his requirements for being a part of the, being a monk, being a part of his monastery. And it was adopted by all the monasteries in the West. Anyway, go ahead.
The regula required the monks to take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and the monastery was organized as a family.
See, and nothing changed to this day, really. Even same thing for nuns who live off to themselves. Same thing. The rule that they had to follow was that they had to take vows of poverty, first of all, so you ain't really trying to have nothing for yourself. Chastity. That's when they running afoul of exactly what we read in the scripture. You might get away with saying taking a vow of poverty, even though the Bible didn't say you had to do that. But you running directly afoul to what Paul told Timothy when you bring in, you must take a vow of chastity. Just like I said, sometimes we got young girls around here, we maybe need to get a chastity belt and put it on them. But yet and still, you can't make that a religious order for people, period. And that's what they did. You grown, capable of getting married, they telling you, nope, if you're going to be a part of this, you have to take a vow of chastity saying you're not going to get married. Isn't that, we know that's what nuns do to this day, right? On the woman's side, and we know that's what the priests do. They have to take a vow to be celibate. And some of them that went against it, they get kicked out. They can't be no priest. Just like this guy in France. What they call him, the Oprah priest. And they caught him on the beach, fumbling around with a lady. He had to switch religions quick. Because they weren't going to have that. They had one priest, he ended up getting married some people. They excommunicated him. Made him recant and get a divorce. So, this is what he's talking about in the Bible. He said this doctrine that they was going to come up in the future. Paul knew it. Obviously it wasn't going on in Paul's day, right? But he knew it was coming. How did he know it was coming anyway? The Spirit told him point blank it was coming. He said the Spirit spoke to me expressly about this. That show you we know he wasn't lying because we looking at it to this day, aren't we? Mm-hmm. But it was going on way back here. Now, even in 529, that was almost 500 years after Paul's time. But it was going on back here because it said here, Benedict's rule that he required the monks to take vows of poverty and chastity and obedience, and the monastery was organized as a family. Finish that.
Under the abbot, the word comes from the Greek abbas, meaning father.
See, under the father, it was a family under the father, that's what the priests are called to this day, father, right? Go ahead.
Life in 6th and 7th century monasteries was severe but not harsh.
They say it was severe but not harsh. That means it was rough, but it was fair. That's what they saying. But go ahead.
Being divided between sleeping, working, and praying. Uh-huh. The monks had a pound of bread, 2 cooked dishes, and a measure of wine each day.
See, they didn't mind drinking wine now, which is not a sin. So they okay so far. So this is what they was eating. It said the monks had a pound of bread, 2 cooked dishes, and a measure of wine each day. So they was really, basically they was disciplining themselves. They had everything in order. There's nothing wrong with that until you start enforcing it and making it a religious doctrine. Right. He said they had a pound of flesh, 2 cooked dishes, and a measure of wine each day, though what?
Though eating meat was forbidden.
Oh, but somebody told them now, you can't eat no meat now if you're going to come up in here. Though eating meat was forbidden. Isn't that, now this is a history book. I ain't had nothing to do with it. Reader's Digest wrote this too, by the way. Didn't have nothing to do with it. This is identical to what Paul told us in 1 Timothy 4, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's identical. He told you, the Spirit told him, in a lot of time, people was going to come along, depart from the faith. That means they had knew about the Lord. But they departed with these seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. speaking lies and hypocrisy, and they conscience is seared with a hot iron. That means there's no mind in them no more. They believe what they believe no matter what you say. And he said that two doctrines that you can recognize them by is forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats. And that was meat, period. See, that never was God's law. That's a doctrine of a devil. And we just read about it. Chastity and eating meat is forbidden, right? So we know who he was pointing us to. It's important to know that because that's how you're going to be able to distinguish between God's true church and the false church, between the bride and the whore. That's how you're going to be able to distinguish. We see God only deal with Israel. Where these other people come from? How they get to be the church now? Somebody should ask that question. When I was little, I said, how the Pope get so, how he get to be so big? I used to wonder, who is the Pope? But when you understand history, you see how he got the way he is and where he come from, but you still know who represent God. Now let's go a little further. We finished that. Go to the next history book, which is last 2 million years, and it's just a page back, page 215. We're going to read the Middle Age because we're going to back up a little and see how this all got started in the first place. Because we just jumped into it to identify from the scripture what Paul said. But now we're going to see how this thing got a hold in the world anyway. So this is the Middle Ages, because of course they got some kind of reasoning on how they got control and they are the church. So it said the Middle Ages, this is an era of faith. Go ahead and read that.
For 400 years.
Go ahead and read the caption too.
Okay, 500 to 1500 AD. In the wake of the barbarian invasions, the authority of the Christian church brought 1,000 years of unity to Europe. Okay, so now, this is about the Middle Ages. It said an era of faith. So they talking about the time span between the 500, we was reading about Benedict, which was 529, it said. They talking about the time span between the 500 AD and 1500 AD. So we're going to get it closer and closer to our time. We was reading the Bible, which is prior to all of this, and we didn't see the Lord dealing with nobody but Israel. We saw Jesus say with his own mouth, I am not sent but unto Israel, right? That's what the Bible said. But now we still got to figure out how the world is the way it is today. So that's why we bringing in the history part of it. So we read about Benedict and the rules that he had in the 500 AD. Now it's even telling you that from 500 to 1500, this church is what gave Europe some stability. And they call it the Christian church, but you just have to know which Christian church it is. Is it the real one from Israel, or is it the false one from Rome? That's what you have to know. And obviously it's talking about the one from Rome. But it said in the wake of barbarian invasions, the authority of the Christian church brought 1,000 years of unity to Europe. Why? Is this because basically the official date for Rome, the Roman Empire falling, is 476 AD. That's when the last emperor got knocked off. Okay, so from that point, you know, things in shambles, things not organized like they would want it. So what they saying is when the emperor fell, the church is what stepped in and kept things together. And of course, the church got a leader. So this is how he got his authority more and more, because the emperor got knocked upside the head. But now go ahead and read it. For 400 years, the Roman Empire gave unity and security to the Mediterranean world and to Europe up to and at times beyond the Rhine. After the final collapse of Rome in 476, when his last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Goths under the leadership of Odoacer, the Christian church gave Europe a similar measure of unity for the next 1,000 years. Okay, so they said, look, the Roman Empire held it together for 400 years. That's basically from the time of Jesus, around that time, up until when it got knocked off in 476 AD by this
It said it named the king, the one who was in king, or Dacia,